Hi, I'm Doug Young, here for Acoustic Guitar. In this video, we're going to take a look at the examples that accompany the article Great Moments in Fingerstyle Guitar. This is 10 different examples inspired by great recordings by great fingerstyle guitarists. So in each example, we'll learn a little bit about the technique and the general style of the tune. And I encourage you to go check out the real tune, even find the transcriptions if you can for the real thing. But we'll look at the technique and the basic idea behind these tunes in these examples. So let's dive in. So that's example one, which is inspired by David Graham's tune, Angie. The basic idea of Angie is the descending bass line, steady bass notes, two per note. So you want to practice that, get used to it. If you're used to playing alternating bass, it may take a little bit of getting used to the idea that you're playing this steady. While you're doing that, the idea is to play some melody over top. You can also think, by the way, of this descending bass line as being accompanied with chords. So it's an A minor, an A minor over G, an F, and an E. So that might be the next step in mastering this tune, is just play those chords. But then after that, the idea is that there's a melody over top of that bass line. So it's about having thumb independence of playing that bass line while you play a melody over top of that. Angie has had lots of variations. If you listen to the different people who've interpreted it, they all add their own little improvised sections or their own little interpretation of the melody, and you can do the same. So you could start with the example here, but then go ahead yourself and mess around and see what other lines and licks you can come up with, all while maintaining that steady bass. That's example two, which is inspired by a tune called the Earl of Salisbury. It's actually a Renaissance piece written for keyboard by William Byrd. But the version that we're looking at here is inspired by an arrangement by John Renbourn, who placed it on the guitar, actually making it a very popular piece for guitarists. And it's representative of John Renbourn's interest in Renaissance medieval music. So this is a fairly straightforward example, but it's a nice example of showing how you can have moving voices in different parts. And the main focus of this should be making sure that the melody comes out while you're playing the counter melody, the lines in between. So if we just looked at the melody itself, it would be like this. So you want to make sure that comes out while you're playing. Let me play it for you slowly. Hi, that's example number 3, an example based on or inspired by Leo Kaki's The Driving of the Year Nail off his 6 and 12 string guitar album, the opening track. Kaki played this on a 12 string guitar, And in particular, he tended to tune down. I believe on the 6 and 12 string guitar, he was tuned down 2 whole steps. But more recently, he's tended to tune down 1.5 steps, which is a little easier to do without changing your strings. So that's what I've done here. Another important, obvious thing here is that it's played on a 12 string, which makes things sound pretty jangly and pretty full automatically. A little hard to hear what's going on. So I'm going to switch to a 6 string in walking you through this example, and then we'll listen to it on the 12 string again. Okay, so now I've got a 6 string guitar and I'm tuned to standard pitch. So if you want to try to play along, you won't need to retune your guitar. Let's take a look at this and see what's going on. The thing that's interesting about Kaki's music is that it's often based on relatively standard alternating bass type style that we would ordinarily think of as Travis picking, but it doesn't sound like Travis picking when Kaki does it. One of the reasons is rather extreme speed. So for example, if we were to simply play this, we'll play the first 2 measures at a pretty moderate pace and play it in a Travis sounding style, we would have an alternating bass that goes 1, 2, 3, 4. But Kaki's basically going double speed. So it sounds like we're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, which kind of breaks out of the Travis sound, especially when played on a 12 string. The other thing that's going on is that there's a note in the middle, in many cases, in the pattern. So really, that's the underlying pattern that Kaki is creating over which he puts a melody. When played really fast, so let me play this slowly for you and on the 6 string at normal pitch. Not too difficult when played at that speed, but you've got to get it up as fast as you can play it to sound anything like Leo, and it helps to play it on the 12th string. I'll play it slowly on the 12th string for you. That's example 4, which is inspired by Turning, Alex DeGrassi's tune from his release Turning Back, a Windham Hill release that made a big impact on the fingerstyle world. Turning was used an unusual tuning, and we can approach this tuning in 2 ways. Alex played it as E, B, E, F sharp, B, E. Which requires tuning a bunch of strings up. But the other way that you can do this tuning, and that Alex himself sometimes did, is to tune it to D-A-D, E-A-D, which is a little bit like dadgad, which you might be familiar with, except the 3rd string is tuned down to E. Instead of a G, we tune it all the way down to an E. And then we capo on the 2nd fret, putting us back in the key of E. So we've got, if we ignore the capo, we're tuned to D, A, D, E, A, and D. So this example is pretty simple. It really leverages the sonority of the tuning. Most of it is spent creating a D sus sound created by fingering at the 3rd fret, 3rd string, 4th fret, 4th string. introduction of the tune. And then there's a simple melody starting in measure 5. And the trick is just to play that melody while keeping these arpeggios going underneath. And really keeping everything sustaining. So example 5 is based on James Taylor's Fire and Rain. James Taylor, of course, was not a fingerstyle instrumental guitar player, but he still had a huge impact on the fingerstyle community through his unique style. Taylor is quite often capoed at the 3rd fret. I think sometimes at the 2nd fret. His style is mostly standard tuning, sometimes drop D. And he typically is using fairly simple shapes, D chords, A chords, but he has a lot of unique little phrasing things that he does, including offset bass notes, anticipating chords, having voices that come in before the beat so that it creates a suspension on top of the chord, and of course these hammer-ons and pull-offs that create a touch that's uniquely James Taylor. I'll play it through slowly for you and try to pay attention to all the hammer-ons and pull-offs. Example 6 is from an introduction of a Joni Mitchell tune, I Had a King. Joni, of course, is, again, not a instrumental fingerstyle guitarist, but she had a huge impact on the fingerstyle guitar world through her exhaustive use of alternate tunings. She used over 50 alternate tunings, some of them quite unusual, and created sounds and textures that became an important influence on fingerstyle guitarists. This particular piece, I am tuned to D-A-D, D-A-D, which means that the 4th and 3rd strings are tuned together to the same pitch. So we've got 2 strings side by side tuned to the same pitch. I am capoed at 7th fret. Some sources say that this tune was tuned a step higher, capoed at the 5th fret. So that would be E-B-E, E-B-E, which is certainly another optional that requires tuning strings up. So it's a lot easier to tune to D-A-D, D-A-D, although you may find that your 3rd string is a little floppy when tuned all the way down to D. So the other thing about Joni's approach to guitar is that she often had interesting picking patterns. She didn't do something as simple as alternating bass or any kind of pattern like that. Often it's arpeggios that have sort of an offset to them so that the notes don't always fall in the beat where you think. So for example, looking at example 6 again, the first 4 notes, it's all on the first beat, 16th notes. And then B2 starts at the top of the arpeggio. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So having that pattern going takes a little bit of practice. Generally, Joni used very simple shapes. So this is sort of like an E major chord shape if we were in standard tuning, slid up to the 5th fret relative to the capo, and she's simply playing that shape, sliding it down to create different textures and different dissonances, which is another thing to notice about this. These chords are quite dissonant if you play them as strummed chords, but when you play them as arpeggios, it creates a really nice effect. Example 7 is based on the tune Voyage to Ireland from Pierre Bensusan's album Musiques. Bensusan, early in his career, used a lot of different alternate tunings and experimented with everything, including standard tuning. But by Musiques, he had settled in on dadgad tuning with the idea that he wanted to take one tuning, and he just picked one that he liked, dadgad, and really explore it. And so listening to his music is an exercise in understanding how deep you can go with a non-standard tuning, because he can play in any key, all styles, and he knows all the chords in dadgad tuning. Voyage to Ireland is a sort of an example that has a Celtic twist to it, as much of Bensusan's music did and still does. It's actually a fairly good example of the sound of dadgad, because we're using a lot of open strings and getting the sound of dadgad tuning, which, by the way, if you don't know, D, A, D, G, A, D. One of the hallmarks of Bensusan's music is sort of syncopation, anticipated bass notes placed in places you wouldn't expect, and with dadgad tuning, lots of hammer-ons and pull-offs help make things work. Also, at the same time, it's got a very strong melody. So the melody of my example, which is inspired by Voyage to Ireland, play this through slowly for you. So that's example 8, which is based on Michael Hedges' tune, Bensusan, dedicated to Pierre Bensusan. And the example tries to incorporate a number of the techniques that Michael used in his tune. First of all, we're in an unusual tuning, C, G, D, G, A, C, and we're capoed at the 3rd fret. This example uses several non-traditional techniques which are fairly subtle. So I'll walk you through them one by one. Let's take a look measure by measure. First of all, the first measure is pretty straightforward, except that it starts on an upbeat. So there's an anticipated note. And there's sort of a sense of motion to it. But measure 2 has a lot more interesting going on. The first note, the first bass note, is tapped. You could also sometimes call this a hammer-on from nowhere, because instead of playing a note and hammering on, we're not playing the note, and we just hammer on or tap. So we tap the note, pick 2 open strings with that hand, tap another bass note on the 4th fret of the 5th string. Then there's a slap harmonic done by hitting the 12th fret above the nut, so actually the 15th fret here. I'm using my middle finger. You can use whatever works for you. Just a sharp rap across there. You can get lots of different sounds out of that. So pick what you think sounds good. Then, immediately after the slap, we're still holding the note on the 5th string, and we do what's called an explosive pull-off. If I simply was playing this note and pulled off, we'd have one note. But instead, what I'm doing is forcefully going across the strings to sound at least another string. You can do as much as you want. So let me play that measure for you. Measure 3 is pretty straightforward. Then it repeats. And now, right out of that explosive pull-off, we go into another hammer-on from nowhere, or tapping. But this time, it's on the 5th string, 5th fret, and we immediately do another hammer-on. And then pluck 2 open strings. A little harmonica. And then finally, in measure 7, the last measure, we have a very interesting technique, one of my favorite things that Hedges sometimes does, and he does it several times in his tune business on, is to play a hammer-on or a pull-off on one note while plucking another. And so this measure 7 goes like... And let me break that down for you. Let's just look at the top line. Let's look at the first 2 notes. We play the 1st string, then while plucking the 2nd string, do a pull-off. The second set of triplets doubles down on that by doing a pull-off followed by a hammer-on, and again on different strings than we're picking. So the picking hand here is, in this example, is doing. That's it, very simple. While this hand is doing. So the result is. If we put that together with a couple bass notes. That's example 9, which is loosely based on an arrangement by Tommy Emmanuel of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Tommy, in his example, goes on a quite extended harmonic introduction, which is quite amazing to listen to. This gives you a little taste of that. The most interesting thing about this example, of course, is these harmonics. And so I'm going to walk through how these are done. Tommy Emmanuel takes these to an incredible height. He plays them very fast, very smooth, and creates an amazing harp-like effect. And it could take years of practice to sound anything like what Tommy does. But you can get started, and it's a beautiful sound, and not all that difficult to do the basics. So I'm going to show you the basic idea before we dive into looking at the music as written. I'm going to show you using no fretting hand because, frankly, you're going to want to practice a lot this technique, and holding down bars for long periods with this hand is going to get pretty tiring. So I'm going to show you initially with open strings. I'll show you the pattern, and then we'll look at the example. So first of all, the first thing that we want to do is to be able to play a harmonic by touching your index finger to the 12th fret lightly and plucking the string and sort of lifting up as you play. So once you can get a nice clean harmonic that way, what we're going to do is we're going to play a harmonic. In this case, I'll start on the 3rd string, 12th fret. I'm going to play a harmonic on that string, and then I'm going to pluck the open 1st string without a harmonic. Once you can do that, we do that and then move over a string and do it again. Then move over and do it again. And we can do the opposite direction as well. So now, let me show you the pattern that's used in the first two measures of my example 9. But again, I'm going to do it on the 12th fret because you're going to want to practice this quite a bit, and you don't want to wear your hand out fretting, barring at the 9th fret. So we're going to use the 12th fret open. And here's the pattern that's used in the first measure of example 9. And then the second measure starts with the D string open and goes back up. Put that together. So once you can do that at least a moderate speed, you're ready to try playing it at the 9th and 21st fret. So we're going to bar across the 9th fret, and then we need to find the spot 12 frets above where we're barring. 9 plus 12 is 21. Where that is on your guitar is going to depend on how many frets you have. On this guitar, it ends up being right past, this is the 20th fret, right past that 20th fret, right at the end of the fretboard. But your guitar may vary. So you need to find that spot. And then we'll play the same way we did just a minute ago. And it's just a question of how fast you can play that and how smoothly you can play it and how even the dynamics are. You need to sort of try to match the volume of the open strings with the harmonics. And take it slow, because the most important thing is to have it be clean and have things ring out. Next, in measure 3, we use a different chord. And the interesting thing about this is that we have to make the harmonics match the outline of the chord shape. So this is just a B7th shape down at the 7th fret. And now, to play the harmonic, we need to go to the 19th fret, and then the 21st fret, back to the 19th, to the 20th, to the 19th, 19th. And the next, in measure 4, we use a D9 chord. And there's a couple ways we can do this. One is Tommy tends to play by holding down 2 bass strings with 1 finger. And if you can do that, great. And notice again that I've got to trace out the shape of this E9 chord. I'm at the 19th fret, 19th, 18th, 19th, 19th, 19th. Nicely with this E9 chord, you can play a harmonic here without fretting the 6th string. But that only works at that particular location. Anyway, that's the basic idea. The rest of the piece, where he launches into sort of the melody of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, this is the chords to that. Should be pretty straightforward. Example 10 is based on Andy McKee's famous tune, Drifting. And although Andy's tune is a bit more complicated than what I'm doing here, this captures the basic technique. So we'll go over those and show you what's happening. This tune is interesting in that there are no traditional techniques. We never fret a note and then pluck it. Everything is done with 2 hands totally independently. So we've got the left hand that is playing over the top of the neck. By the way, we're in Dad-Gad tuning, D-A-D, G-A-D. And so it gives us a power chord on the bottom 3 strings. And those are played by going over the neck and hammering on. You can use 1 finger. If you got room and your fingers fit, you can use 2 fingers together for a little more strength. You could also double up a little bit to reinforce that finger. So you get a nice clean tap. So the left-hand part at the beginning, in the first introduction, just goes, and then a pull-off. 2 staccato taps, and then hold, pull off. Meanwhile, the other hand, along with this hand in a minute, is using percussion. So we've got 3 percussive sounds that I'm using in this example. One I'm calling a kick drum, and that's to hit down here on the guitar. Another I'm calling a tom, which is to hit up here, a little higher pitched. And the other is a snare effect here, which is slightly increased by the fact that I have a ring. So be careful if you don't want to mess up your top, but it does give you a nice crack there. And even if you don't use the ring, you can get a nice sound. So let's just look at the first measure. And then in measure 2, we hit and hold, kick drum, pull off, snare, and then a slap harmonics, striking the strings right at the 12th fret. Then in measure 3, we start a melody. And here, again, the left hand continues to do. But the right hand is now going to play a melody by tapping out a melody. I'm starting at hitting at the 12th fret, and again, you just tap right on that string. We're playing, the melody is very simple. So tap, slide, pull off. And then let me play measures 3 and 4 very slowly. And then ends with a staccato tap.